I don't know about you, but I find it really difficult to create sympathy cards. But they're a card that we need in life. So I was really glad to see that Gina K Designs has come out with a new sympathy set. Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel, and in today's video I'll be featuring the new Gina K Designs with Sympathy stamp set and the background stamp vintage filigree. First, let me show you the two new sets that I'll be working with today. This is the new 6x8 stamp set with Sympathy, and there are several stem designs. There's also several large Sympathy stamps, sentiments, and then there are sub-sentiments or smaller font type that you could use inside the card as well. This is vintage filigree. It's a 6x6 clear stamp and a good background stamp for an elegant card. Now let's use them to make a couple of cards. I'm starting with vintage filigree. The thing that I like about background stamps that are clear stamps is that you can easily line up the pattern. So you can see I have my cardstock in my original Misty. Now it is stuck down, not in the corner, it's in the center. And that's because I'm using a waffle flower grip mat underneath it. And that allows me to put the center of that background stamp on the cardstock. I stamped it with embossing ink after treating it with anti-static powder tool, and now I pour some silver embossing powder on top and then heat set that. I'll trim this panel down to about 4 by 5.25, and I'll make sure to trim on either side so that I keep the center of the design in the center of that panel. I'll place that down on some Gina K silver cardstock. It's not a mirror cardstock, so it doesn't get any fingerprints on it, which I really like. I've grabbed a script sentiment and a swirl from the With Sympathy stamp set, and I'm inking it up with Gina K Amalgam ink. It is the black Obsidian. I like how deep dark black this stamps, and it is great for sentiments. Next, I'll trim that down to a rectangle and add some foam strips on the back of it so that I can pop it up. You can see that I missed a spot on the background. That's why I'm using this larger rectangle to stamp the sentiment and then pop it up, and I'll hide that little mistake behind it. Next, I'm using the inside of a card base. This is a side folding A2 card base. I'll place one of the sentiments that is smaller font on the inside of that. Again, because I have my waffle flower grip mat inside that mini Misty, I can hold that in place without using magnets and just not worrying about where the card is sticking out on the edge. And I love how beautiful that is, how heartfelt those sentiments are. Plus, it's really great to have something already printed on the inside. It'll give you an idea of what you might want to write and add to it, or you can just sign your name and it's a beautiful card regardless. For this next card, I wanted an even more subtle background using that vintage filigree. So I'm using some Gina K Amalgam ink in Whisper. This is technically a no line coloring ink. So you would stamp something like a large flower with this no line coloring ink, and then you would be able to color in the flower and make it look like there were no black lines or lines on the flower at all. It would make it look like your own piece of artwork. But it's also a great subtle background. It's kind of a warm gray, and it's light enough to blend into the background and not really steal the show. It's also light enough to stamp right on top of. So I'm using Jelly Bean Green. It's an ink cube from Gina K and one of the designs from the With Sympathy stamp set. Now, technically, there are little flowers that can go on the ends of these guys, but I really liked it just as a leaf stem, so I didn't add the flowers to any of my cards, but you can absolutely do that. You can see the little flowers on the left-hand side on the stamp set. Here's another stem that I added in another color of ink, and then last but not least, I was able to add the Forever in Our Hearts sentiment, stamping it a couple of times to make sure it really stands out from that background because it's a thin script. Then I cut that down to 4 by 5.25. I'll use a little bit of tape runner behind that panel and then place it down on some Gina K cardstock so that everything kind of coordinates together. It's a very subtle background with a beautiful image and sentiment. Next up, I'll take a piece of A2 white cardstock and I'll start stamping a couple of the images from the With Sympathy stamp set. What's great about these images is you can really layer them up together. This was a stamp set that did not come with matching dies, but that's okay. These images layer on top of each other really beautifully, and then you can even stamp the sentiment touching some of the images. So here is a very clean and simple card panel. I'll cut it down to 4 by 5 1/4, and then add some tape runner behind it and some Gina K cardstock underneath to mat it. And that's all you need, just 3 stamps and you're good to go. So I like to keep things simple, especially with sympathy cards because I struggle so much. So that type of card really works for me very well. I'm doing a very similar design with this card. It will have a little heat embossing, but it's still going to be very clean and simple. So I stamped one of the designs from the With Sympathy stamp set with Versamark ink, and I'm covering it up with gold embossing powder. You can see how pretty it looks with that gold embossing powder. So again, you don't need dies with this set. It really can just be stamped and then add some sentiments, and that's it. That's all you need. And the sentiments are so heartfelt and beautiful, and the images are so simple and clean and elegant that you don't need to add a lot of other things to complete these beautiful sympathy cards. I did cut this down again to 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm matting it on Gina K's gold cardstock this time. Again, it is not a mirror cardstock, so it doesn't show up fingerprints, which is really nice. It just has kind of a shimmer of gold or silver, depending on which you get. Again, very, very clean and simple. 3 stamps and a little heat embossing and then cutting it down to mat it, and that's it. So for this card, I'll do something very similar. Again, I'm going with that similar design of some of those stems and then sentiments. This time I'm putting the sentiment on the top rather than on the bottom. That's something you can play around with if you're trying to create a bunch of clean and simple cards, but you don't want them all to look exactly the same. So for this one, I'll also do some multicolor stamping. So for this stem, you can see I've got the bottom of it and just sort of the stems in green. It's a mint green from Gina K, and then those flowers I'll ink up with Gina K Designs Sea Glass ink, which is one of my absolute favorite colors. I highly recommend it. It is a great blue. And I have another stem from the stamp set, again with that mint color, and I'm stamping it so it's close enough that the bottom of the stem is going to look like they are all coming together as a little bouquet of stems. And then I decided another sentiment under the With Sympathy would really balance this card out. This one says wishing you peace and comfort. So that can definitely be used as a sub-sentiment or as an interior sentiment for your card. And I love that you can do both with these. I've cut it down to 4 by 5 1/4, and I am adhering it down to an A2 piece of cardstock from Gina K. I'll have all the cardstock colors and things linked down below in the YouTube description box. But I hope that you can see that these sympathy cards are super simple to make. They come together very quickly, and it really is the stamp set that is creating their beauty. So I highly recommend this set if you struggle with sympathy cards. I don't know about you, but I really struggle with sympathy cards, and I'm always glad to see a really beautiful set that allows me to easily create some pretty yet clean and simple sympathy cards. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about these new stamps. Let me know in the comments below. As always, I want to thank you so much for stopping by and spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. What are you doing? We got a dog in here. Let's see if I can. Nope, you're fine, 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 you're fine. Nope, can't get him. Let's try that one more time. Whoa, how did that all of a sudden look so weird?